for joining us here today. Is everyone having a good day? Yeah, awesome. So it's about to get better because we're about to talk about how to get to the top U.S. universities. Everyone online, thank you also for joining. I know we have audience members from Vietnam as well, so welcome. And I'm happy to have everyone here today. So to get started, I just want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be covering here today, which will come up the agenda. So we'll go through some introductions about Point Avenue and our team, and then talk a little bit about what we do here before we go into some student activities where students will get up and follow one of our consultants to take a test to evaluate your interests, right, and your strengths. And then while that's happening, parents will stay in this room to hear from two people who have worked in admissions before and get an inside look into what colleges are looking for, right? And so to begin, I'll introduce myself. My name is John Fujita, or you can call me Yuki. Please come in. Yeah. Yuki is my Japanese name. So you can call me Yuki or John, whichever one you feel like. I'm happy with either one. I went to UCLA and studied English and minored in film and television studies. And I've been with Point Avenue since almost the beginning, back in 2018, where we started. And I've helped dozens of students just like yourselves get into your best fit colleges, wherever that might be, right? Hopefully one of these one day, right? And so if we move along, just want to introduce our team a little bit, right? So our admissions consulting team consists of myself. I am the manager of the admissions consulting department. Adam, who is another consultant with tons of experience. Miss Kieran here is the one who will be taking the students to go do the activity. She has a wealth of experience over a decade mentoring and coaching students and figuring out what you like to do and how you develop those interests, right? And then Paul Fontana, who will be one of our speakers today, who worked in NYU admission before. And I just want to touch on our test prep team, right? So I think a majority of you in here are 10th graders, right? And so if you're not already thinking about SAT or TOEFL, right, it's time to start thinking about those things, right? Because the last thing you want is to be taking your standardized tests while you're also trying to, cram in your college applications and taking your hardest classes and really trying to make something awesome out of your extracurricular activities, right? And so I just want to let everyone know that this summer, right, there's going to be a 6-week workshop for SAT, SSAT, if you're going to boarding school, and also TOEFL, right, top our expert team here, right? And they have a wealth of experience. I'm really proud of both of our teams and really trust them to take you where you want to go, right? So if we got the next slide. So today, our main event for the parents, right, are to hear from Mr. Tommy and Mr. Paul over here, right? They both worked in admissions before in UPenn and NYU. And the next slide, though, will be Tommy. I'll let him introduce himself and talk a little about Point Avenue.
Thank you again, Yuki. Thank you again. Okay. Can I ask, does anybody here need translation support, just in Thai? I can move one of my team members to help translate to Thai if you would prefer it. It's perfectly okay if you want to raise your hand. If not, then I'll attempt to speak a little bit slower so that everything gets across. Okay, thank you so much. Again, my name is Tommy, COO co-founder of our parent company, which is NPX Point Avenue. So you guys are all here at Point Avenue, Thailand, right, which is our first establishment in Thailand. We, like Yuki had shared, we had originally been founded out of Singapore, our first establishment out of Vietnam. So we actually have two hybrid centers like this in Hanoi, 2 centers in Ho Chi Minh City. And this is our first footprint in Bangkok, Thailand, if you will. We do have founders who are Thai. We also have founders who are Vietnamese Americans, such as myself. One part of what we do is the after schools, which is this, English learning, test preparation, admissions consulting, camps. And we also have a K-12. So we have a consortium of international schools called True North Schools as well. So I help oversee all this. But today I'm spending time with all of you with a segment that's very near and dear to my heart, which is helping students get into their dream universities, right? Their goals. This is where I come from. Myself, I'm Vietnamese American. I was born and raised in the U.S. Attended a school at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Spent the first 10 years in government before ultimately moving to transitioning out. Went to the University of Pennsylvania, where I completed my master's in business. And then also at that time was serving on the admissions team for 2 years, right? Eventually pivoted out, did finance at Goldman Sachs, and then got a call to kind of come back here to kind of help oversee operations within our educational group. And for me, it aligns with what I want to do, and just kind of makes sense of it, right? For me, going into the military, going into government, was always about helping people, right? It was after 9/11. I don't think any students here were here for 9/11, but I think many of our parents remember 9/11. And then from there, education is a way for me to continue giving in a different way, right? Asian American, but I'm still Asian. Vietnamese American, but I'm definitely Vietnamese, right? And being able to translate my educational experiences to all of our students is kind of a rewarding thing. Admittedly, the most, what I enjoy most, although I focus on operations, is working with all of our talented academic teachers, mentors, consultants, right, to help students here. It's really what we focus on. Point Avenue, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit differently before I go straight into applications. We approach things very differently. We very much believe in our people and our products, right? All of you here have many choices in what English learning centers, admissions consulting centers you can choose, right? There's many of them. But for us at Point Avenue, very committed to starting and finding the right people, right? Because without the right people, all of you students, how many of you enjoyed learning over COVID by Zoom? Nobody did, right? Learning over Zoom, learning over a platform, it's difficult, right? There's a reason why education has been slow moving over the past 3,000 years, because there's one way that works. It's putting students in front of a teacher, right? It's who you trust. And so that's what we are committed to, right? Finding the right people to put in front of your students and training and mentoring those same teachers, those mentors to do the same for your kids, right? Next slide. All right. So obviously this, you see some of our footprint. Myself, I spend half my time, half to maybe 2/3 of my time in Vietnam. And then I spend the other third of my time here with our Bangkok, Thailand team, right? And obviously very beautiful center here. It's a reflection of investing in the center as well. Next slide. I think we've touched on this enough. Next slide. All right. Just to brag a little bit on our admissions consulting. Again, in Southeast Asia, we've been present for 4 years, right? Just to talk a little bit about what we focus on, because our product is not for everyone, right? We don't just do application support, right? We do true mentorship. My mentors, right, will partner with, whether it's with the students and with the parents, right, to help them find their extracurricular passion, their academic interests, right? Help them research the place where they want to go and where they want to go. We really do try to push students to their maximum limit, right? I know there are plenty of other services out there, right, that either very much help write essays, create clubs for students and all that. That's not what my mentors are about. My mentors are truly about helping your students be authentic, right? To push them to actually do the work so that when they write and fill out their applications, they're expressing their authentic work, right? And this is a reflection of all that, right? Our team, very successful in helping students achieve top results. We do focus on top 40 U.S. universities, right? Top 40 U.S. universities. Today, we'll talk about top 20 and how to prepare for that. But in all reality, top 40 U.S. universities is our bracket. Top 20 U.K. universities, top 10 Canadian, and top 5 Australian, right? We do have support to other schools like, like Singapore and U.S. and stuff like that as well. And some of the other international universities, whether in Asia or in Europe, right? But that's our primary market in terms of helping you understand where we focus our time. Okay, next. Obviously, some other results all across the world. Also, art and design. Do I have any students here who are interested in art, design, interior design, architecture, fashion design? Some of you will be, right? We have successfully guided many students there. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Art and design is a different segment of when we talk about applications, right? But it's also a very competitive space, but it's also a very successful space, right? It just requires a different kind of preparation, right? A lot more focused on portfolio and a lot more focused on, on those specific schools and those specific fashion industries, design industries. But I very much want to support students' success there as well. Next slide. I'm going to go into this. So 2 more slides before I hand it back to Mr. Yuki, and he's going to help proctor the rest of this. My students, right? All of you, and you too, Melody, as young as you are, you're in for a treat today because you're going to glean from some of this, right? The activity that we prepared for you is something that I wish had been prepared for me when I was your age, right? How many of you students know what you want to do for the rest of your life? Raise your hand. Ooh, one hand right away. What do you want to do? Work with animals. How so? What's your favorite animal? What's that? Okay. Why? Okay. I like that. I like that clarity, right? I always talk about clarity, concision, precision. That's a very extreme focus. Myself, truthfully, right, for all the other students, if you didn't have an immediate answer in terms of what you want to do with the rest of your life, it's okay. You can rest easy, right? For me, it took a long time for me to find out what I might want to do. It's a process, right? It takes time. Obviously, for parents, right, for all of our parents here, your hope is that when your child gets to 12th grade and they apply for university, they apply for the major, that they know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life. Truth is, in the U.S. university, can anybody guess what is the percentage of students that switch majors? Anybody think more than 10%? Anybody think more than 30%? Anybody think more than 50%? Anybody think more than 60%? That's a little bit high. 50%. Dad, you were right. About 50% of students attending universities in the US will switch majors. My sister started with one major. She started in biology. And then, because she wanted to be a pre-med. And then she wanted to understand more than that, right? The act of serving. She added philosophy. And then from philosophy, she wanted to understand beyond that. So she went into theology. Theology, do you know what theology is, hon? Yes, study of religion, many religions. She was a triple major, right? You can do more than one major, right? So don't worry about that as well. All right. But today we're going to do for our students, we're going to do a little bit of activity. It's going to help sample your interest, right? There's no right, wrong answer to the activity, right? But it is a professionalized test, right? Just a small test. There's no right, wrong. It's meant to design to help all of you, right? There's no, again, for whether lady, gentleman, right? There's no right answer. Just answer what you feel honestly and transparently, and it'll help guide you in terms of what you think your interest might be, right? And that gives you a direction, right? That gives you a directions in terms of helping to explore. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So 2 slides before I turn it over. This right here, parents. Go back. This right here, the NACAC. NACAC, ma'am, coming back to visit me a second time again. Very glad to see you again. That stands for the National Association of College Admissions Consulting, right? You can look this up. NACAC, right? This is the latest report, believe it or not, 2018 to 2019. They used to publish this every year, but over COVID, I imagine that some of the trends have been kind of changing, right? But they're still holding place. But this is the latest report. You can go on there. You can download the full report. It's a multi-page report. Basically, what it says is, what do top universities look for? So just to orient you to the slide, right? On the left-hand column are all of the factors that a admissions officer might choose from in terms of selecting a particular style for university, right? Because that's what we're all here for. From left to right, N, right? N stands for basically sample size. How many universities are represented? So you see a maximum number of about 220. And then from left to right, we see considerable importance to no importance, right? Now, to be fair, no university is ever going to say that one factor is the most important, right? But for our students, right, you should read considerable importance as very important, okay? So I'm just only going to call out a few things. You'll see here, what is, so percentage-wise, grades in all courses, grades in college prep courses, 74, 75% almost, right? So what does that tell you is the most important thing when admission officers are looking at applications? Sky? Grades, right? But not just grades. How many of you go to AP schools, advanced placement schools? IB schools, A levels, advanced levels, right? So mostly IBs here and then some others. If you don't go to any of that, that's fine as well. You can still go to a Thai public school and still be very successful, very competitive, right? But grades in college prep courses, that means IB higher level, or that means advanced placement, or that means advanced levels, right? So those are the grades I'm talking about are most important, right? So 73, 75%. Next, some things that I want to circle on from you, which we'll talk about. Extracurricular activities, demonstrated interests, right? Portfolios, right? So 3 things that surround what a student might do outside of the class, right? What are they? Are they the most important? Considerable importance? No. Well, where do they sit, right? 42, 43, 32%, right? Let's see here. Demonstrated interest. Sorry, I'm kind of losing interest or losing sight here, right? Right around here as well, right? So again, is it the most important extracurricular activities? No, right? But is it still important? Absolutely. Especially if we're trying to get into schools, right? Sitting on that banner over there as well, right? So what I'm saying is grades are important. They're critical, but are they sufficient? No, they're not sufficient. To be sufficient means to be enough, right? So they're not sufficient. You still need to look at other things. And then obviously on other things here, we have teacher recommendation, counselor recommendations, which we'll talk about, right? Pay note to here. Paul will talk a lot on this as well. Test scores, right? Very high on the level here. Right after grades, right? And right after like grades in college prep courses, like obviously SAT, ACTs, TOEFLs, IELTS, whatever they are, right? They continue to be the second most important, especially if my students, how many of you are looking for scholarship? No one. Nobody's looking to help their parents. Everybody's hoping their parents just pay full ride. Got it. Sorry, parents, you're not getting that second honeymoon. But no, it's good. Kids, if I can help you understand one thing. Who here is studying for the SAT? Or some sort of, that's good. Hun, you are way ahead, right? No, it's good. All right. Is the SAT fun? No. The SAT is not fun, right? The SAT is not fun. TOEFL, IELTS, none of that is fun, right? And obviously my person's listening on camera. But is it important, right? It depends. It depends on what you want to do, truly, right? But if your hope is to get into a good school, if your hope is to get scholarship, especially, and if your hope is to, jumpstart your life with a good base, then yes, test prep is important. It's not fun. I'm not going to promise my students here, Melody, I'm sorry, when you go do SAT one day, you're not like, yes, it's finally my time to do SAT, right? I'm not going to say that. But it is a critical skill because excellence in SAT shows that you are academically ready for college, for university, right? And by the way, I'll talk about this in a little bit. For university admissions, right? Admissions officers will make one decision. They will say yes and no, right? There's another part of this. Financial aid will also make a decision, yes and no. Because if you are seeking financial aid, that is a different complication, right? And financial aid only looks at one thing, right? Besides your grades, it looks specifically at your test scores, right? So for students, if you're looking to help mommy and daddy, right, with that second honeymoon, right, that SAT score is important, right? I am going to say one thing. You doing the SAT or ACT? Okay. SAT, you're in the 10th grade. You need to finish this December. I would recommend it. The reason for that is, parents, are you aware that the SAT is going to change for international students after this year? Okay, so you understand. So for mom, the SAT is going to change, right, for international students after 2022. So 2023, it's going to go into an online fashion. Now, the format is roughly going to stay the same. It'll be condensed is what we understand it now. It'll be shorter, right? But it'll be all digital, right? Which means it'll be on a computer or whatever said fashion. But so for you, if you're studying right now, and this is the format that you like taking, I would try to finish it this year, right? Which means you're going to cram. It doesn't mean you can't, but you're probably going to cram. You're going to finish, take test 1, probably August or October, right? And then probably last one in December. Just a thought, right? Just some thoughts out there, just to let you know. All right. Any questions on this? I don't think there's too much more, or we can revisit it later. Next slide. All right. This is, based on mine, Yuki's, Paul's admissions experience in terms of looking at students, right? This is what we start students on. I think for many of our students here, right, are mainly in the grade 10. I don't think my man right there is in grade 10. He's probably young, right? But mom is watching. That's okay, because mom is listening for you, right? I promise you it's good, right? For me, I was born in 1985, right? So that makes me about 37, 38 years old, right? Back when I was growing up, applying for colleges, probably Paul, Yuki as well, right? Admittedly, college was competitive, but it was not as competitive as it is now, right? The world population, how many people are there on this world? Take a guess. Pick a number. It's still single digit. A billion times about 7. About 7 billion, right? Close to about there. In my time, it was probably closer to about 4 or 5, right? The population keeps growing. Agree? Right? Eventually, it'll actually, if you ever read, what is that book? What's that book it wasn't Freakonomics. It was something else, Factfulness. The population actually reaches an asymptote. I think it'll stop or it'll close out somewhere closer to about 11 billion. But my point being this, the population continues to grow. Our desire is to get our students into the top universities. Sorry, if we're talking about Ivy Leagues, how many Ivy Leagues are there? Sky, I'm going to pick on you. You know how many Ivy Leagues there are? How many flags are there? 8 Ivy Leagues, right? And all of our parents across the world, we're still trying to get our students into the best schools. Not just the Ivy Leagues, but really top 20, top 40 US universities, top 20 UK universities, right? The number of top universities in the world, do they continue to grow or do they stay the same? They stay the same, right? And so it becomes more complex, more challenging. My point in all this is what, in my time growing up, being well-rounded was important. Getting good grades, doing community service, doing some sports, right? I wasn't very athletic, all right? But doing a few things here and there, just being very well-rounded, that was success, right? But now for our students, right, just the way the world is moving, it's important for you not to be, you want to be strong, right, in everything, but you want to have an edge, right? You need to be what's I call like very angular. It's not well-rounded. You need to be sharp at what you do, right? And so kind of this here, when we talk about how we assess students or how we look at students, for my younger students, right? One day when you're applying for college, no, it's okay. Thank you so much for coming. Just to help you understand, when we assess profiles in applications, we start looking at you from the beginning of grade 9, right? Grade 9 all the way through grade 12. Now, really, when you're applying and you submit, you're going to press submit as soon as probably November of your grade 12, right? Which means that, in all honesty, I'm only looking at 3 years worth of profile, right? You only have 3 years to show me academic excellence and what I call this edge, right? This demonstrated interest, what you're truly passionate in, right? But it's not just about what you say you're passionate in. It's actually what you demonstrate, right? It's what you demonstrate through these 4 pillars. Academic courses. So we talked about college prep courses, advanced placement, IB higher level, advanced level, so A levels, right? So academic courses, number 1. Number 2, what we talked about according to the NACAC, standardized testing, TOEFL, IELTS, SAT, ACT, so forth, right? Extracurricular activities, right? And then summer programming. So just to explain a little bit about this, if you're in the AP world, typically in grade 10, looking at about 1 to 2 APs, right? Grade 11, about 2 to 3, and then grade 12, 3 to 4. For my IB students, obviously, you're generally limited between 3 to 4 higher levels, right? 3 to 4 higher levels. But with academic courses, how do you show a demonstrated interest, right? What I'm going to just to save on time so that we can move students out to do their activities, right? If you're looking to become a doctor, how many parents here want their child to become a doctor? No. Boy, you guys are all. Your mom wants you to be a Melody. My mom, when I used to go to bed every night, used to whisper in my ear, Tommy, become a doctor. Tommy, become a doctor. Tommy. I didn't actually do that. I wish I had. I wish I'd listened to my mother a little bit more. But if you want to become a doctor, what are some classes you need to specialize in? Biology, chemistry, math, English, right? English is actually very important. Students who excel in English actually show that they do well on the MCATs. The MCATs is a test that you eventually take to go to med school, right, in the US. If you want to let's just say if you want to be going to business, what classes would you take to show excellence? Probably math, economics, or business, right? And for all of my students out there, right, I challenge you on this because Asian students are a little bit weaker on this or they're timid. English, communication, right? Math, because I need to be able to work quant. Economics, business, because I need to show strategy. But if you can't communicate that strategy with English, it doesn't really matter what you do, right? So you need to be fluent in that. Things like if you want to go, who are my lawyers out here, politicians? No future politicians here? Mom, your faults. You have a debater here, right? You want to go into law. I remember that, right? Strong in what? Obviously strong in history, strong in communication English, right? And then you can pick any other third subject, right? So that's what I mean by demonstrate interest. I think for test prep, I don't have to talk too much other than that you should start early. Thailand, different market than Vietnam. But no matter what, for my students, if you are trying to achieve excellence early, I challenge you to take the TOEFL IELTS, right? I challenge you to take the TOEFL IELTS early. TOEFL IELTS, two separate tests, but the same measurement, right? What I'm looking for when I say excellence is by grade 9. Somewhere in grade 9, for a TOEFL, you should be at a 105 out of 120. IELTS, you should be at about a 7.5, right? Excellence there will help you create excellence in SAT, ACT, right? Because let's just be honest, right? For all my Asian students who are generally strong in math, right? You're not going to struggle too much there, but where you're going to struggle most is the reading, writing section, right? So finish your TOEFL IELTS in grade 9. You'll take it again at the end, right? You'll take it again because the test's only good for 2 years, but then you move into SAT or ACT, right? Start at your SAT, like my lady here, starting in grade 10 already. That is early. It's aggressive, but I prefer it. I have students that finish SAT, ACT in grade 10, and that is phenomenal if they can do it, right? If you can't do it, why? Because it leaves up all of your grade 11 to do whatever it is you want to do, right? That's important, right? So finish it fast, move on, right? Obviously, SAT, what am I looking for? If we're looking to get into one of these schools, admittedly, 1,500 plus, really 1,530 plus, right? But at a minimum, 1,500 plus SAT. ACT, definitely 34 plus at a minimum, preferably 35, right? That's just the truth. If we're trying to seek like top Ivy Leagues plus whatever, those are the scores we're looking for, right? But if you start early, I promise you, all of you can do it. And all of my educational strategists will tell you the same, right? Getting a top score in SAT, ACT, right? It's not about smartness, right? Everyone can do it. I mean it. It just takes time. Some of us take a little bit more time than others, but that's okay too, right? It's just different ways to look at a problem, right? This right here, this is the most interesting thing. And Ms. Kiran will spend time with our students today, help figure it out. This is actually, I don't want to say this is the easy part, but this is the simplest part to explain, right? Because whatever it is you hope to do, my educational strategists are working with your child to help pair it with activities that reinforce the story, right? Which we'll talk about in our applications, our Q&A here, right? Because let's say, for example, my future doctor. Why do you want to become a doctor? I'm going to put you on the spot. God, Mom, you did well. 9 out of 10s when I ask people why they want to become a doctor, you know what their answer is? No, because they want to make money. I'm like, that is the worst way to make money, right? It takes forever to become a doctor, right? But good on you. For a student in high school, what is the best way to show that you want to help people? Yes? Right? Good. Many different kinds of community service, right? In school, at a children's hospital, many different ways, right? Even if you love basketball, right? Spending time teaching basketball to whatever local neighbors, many different ways for community service. You have to express the desire that you want to help people. Otherwise, if I look at your profile, this person doesn't want to help people. Why does he want to become a doctor, right? Other than that, somebody who wants to become a doctor, what else do they need to be good at? They need to be good at science, right? What is special about science class versus every other class? Where do you spend time in a science class? Lab. You have to have laboratory experience. So that means between your extracurriculars and your summer programming, I must show that you have laboratory expertise. The magical answer is about 100 hours. 100 hours of laboratory time. So you can imagine this is the profile we're trying to build, or academic competitions, science Olympiads, biology Olympiads, chemistry Olympiad, and so forth. Those are a little bit more niche. The other way to show it is science research, right? To show a passion for science, for helping, right? So I just talked about one thing, right? But you can imagine across academic courses, standardized testing, extracurricular activities, summer programming, that is a demonstrated interest, right? That is a very clear line that tells admissions officers, right? Like when I want to go to your school to learn this, and this is why, look at my background. Enough said, right? Versus like, if over here you want to become a doctor, but you don't have any AP bio, any AP chem, your test scores are kind of whatever, right? And your extracurriculars are you just playing football and playing basketball, it's hard to convince me that you want to be a doctor. Agree? Right? So that's just a small snippet. I think I am done on this. Any questions? Oh, by the way, just last on this, parents. Most important advice I can give you as far as this whole slide. You see here, extracurricular activities, our team puts 3 to 5, grade 9. 3 to 5, grade 10. 2 to 3 here, 2 to 3 here, right? Well, Tommy, why does it get smaller, right? It looks like a funnel. It's just because in the beginning, again, remind me, besides yourself, how many other persons know what they want to do with the rest of their lives? We don't, right? So I encourage you, grade 9, grade 10, try as many things as possible. Try. Just go out there and just try, right? If you don't know where to try, look at all your best friends. Where are they going, right? Follow them to an event, right? Because most likely, wherever it is your best friends are going, wherever they're interested, there might be a chance you might find an interest there, right? So go over there, seek it out. And then eventually, over the next years, right? Eventually you're going to find that interest, right? So your final 2 years, my hope is that you become a president, a captain, a co-captain, some sort of club officer, right? But parents, you have to guide. And then for students, your promise to me is that when you try something, when you tell your parents, right? Like, Mom, Dad, I want you to pay this fee so I can go in here and do this club or whatever it is, right? Stick to it for a year, right? Promise me a year. There's actually a lot of science behind it. It's called the book called Grit by Angela Duckworth. She's a famous psychologist, but talks a lot on the importance of sticking with something for a year. Even if it's outside of a club, playing a guitar, dancing, anything else, right? Stick to it for a year, right? You'll gain a lot more from it. All right? Next slide. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Tommy. It's super informative. I hope everyone learned something there, right? And now Miss Kieran, who has had over a decade of experience working with students, coaching them, mentoring them, is going to take the students here, right, to do a inventory or a learning style inventory quiz where you will learn what your strengths and interests are, right? Especially for those who don't know what they like, right? This is going to be a quiz to understand your personality a little bit better. And then she'll go over the results with you to give you an idea about what you can do and talk about how do you take that thing and innovate and make it better, right? And so can I ask all the students to stand up and follow Miss Kieran over there?
The young ones go too?
Yeah, the young ones. Yeah, I think the young ones.
No, you should go too.
Yeah.
Honey, you should go.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And so next slide, but we are going to get to, for the parents, to have a conversation between Mr. Tommy and Mr. Paul, right? And so Mr. Paul is one of our education consultants here as well. He has he went to Ithaca College and got his degree there before he went to NYU to earn his Master of Fine Arts in dramatic writing. And he's had also over 10 years of experience consulting with students, mentoring them. 15 years as a professional writer, right? And he spent 2 years at NYU admissions evaluating applications, right? And so today, right now, what we're going to do is have a conversation between them two to learn a little bit more of an inside look about what does university admissions actually look for, right? And so thank you both for joining us, right?
Sure.
And we'll get started.
Parents, so this next part is, while we do have a few design, like Q&A questions amongst ourselves, which are very typical, right? So this next part does not focus on like that whole 4-year roadmap that I just talked about. This next part just focuses purely on college applications. So for college applications, just to set the background, especially for those listening in, our team members, we work with students beginning the month of May, right? So last month, of their grade 11, right? So that means the end of their grade 11, right? We have already completed school research with your students. Your students know exactly where they want to apply to, right? They know why they want to apply to, and they are capable of explaining to all of you why they want to go, like where they want to go, why they want to go, and what they hope to achieve out of it, right? And so the application season for at least our team, right, for a student going to grade 12 actually begins the May before grade 12, right? So we work all summer with them to prepare everything from the common application, which is their activities, their honors. It's kind of like their resume, right? Letters of recommendation, we're already starting a format, which we then have to work with their teachers. Essays, so many essays, right? Like almost 2, 3, 4 essays per school, depending on the kind of school, right? I think MIT is my least favorite there. But in terms of essays, right? And so there's a lot to prepare for because the first deadline, just for you all know, if you don't, I'm happy to share. The first deadline that we are driving towards is typically the 1st of November, early November, right? That's what we call early action, early decision, right? Early action, early decision is the first deadline amongst US-based universities or liberal arts colleges, right? The second deadline, right, is in the beginning of January, right? So that's what we call round 1 decision, right? Or regular decision, if you will. The Canadians, and the UK, and then also Australian universities have similar timelines. I think Canadian, Australian more of a rolling basis. UK definitely has a fixed timeline that is close to the American application process. But for today, just based on our topic, we're going to focus on US universities. If you're looking for more specific information to the other countries, right, our team members are happy to answer, right? But just so that you understand, the US application process is in my personal regard, probably the most competitive, right? So understanding this will help you understand the other ones as well. Okay?
Yeah. And, everything that Tommy was talking about previously, it's really important because it builds into the application, right? When we're talking about essays, you're telling a story about who you are. And if you haven't thought about that before you get to the application, it becomes really difficult, right? And so we'll get started with some of these questions, right? And at the end, we'll have a Q&A for both anyone here as well as the audience online. But just to get started, right, since you both work in admissions offices, NYU, right, and UPenn, right, can you tell us more specifically about what you actually did in the admissions office? And, before the application gets to you, were there other layers of evaluation before you actually read it?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Paul. So at NYU, there were different layers. I think it was probably the same way at Penn. But by the time it got to me, the threshold of grades and SAT scores were already met, right? So they filtered it through a computer. They said this person got 1,400, 1,450. Now at NYU this past year, I think the median score was 1,530. That's NYU, which is not up there.
Still a good school.
Still a great school. I was going to bring my flag. They said no. Anyways,
So that West Point up there.
So then it comes to me. And what I do is I evaluate the extracurricular activities, the letters of recommendation, and most importantly, with my degree and what I was hired for was the essays, was the evaluation of the essays. And then what I did was I would write these evaluations and it would either go into the pass up to my boss pile, which is the final accept or reject, or it would go into another pile, right? The evaluations were quite extensive if I had the time. But for the most part, I think one thing you have to understand is that the first thing I saw was the extracurricular activities. That's the first time I'm meeting your child, right? That's your child. I think a lot of students don't understand that application is them. That's all I get. If it was up to me, I would meet every one of them in person, right? But you can't do that. So it was very important when I saw those ECAs, what was written.
For myself, so very much like Paul, right? I'm trained to read an entire application, right, including essays and all that. But admittedly, I spend the majority of my time, right, again from UPenn, specifically for Wharton, screening the rest of the profile. Everything from your activities, to your honors, to your grades, sometimes having to, even though we can throw grades into a computer, right? Sometimes we have to reconcile grades. So what I mean is like for students who have like solid GPAs, like high 3.8, 3.9 GPAs, but then SATs are not at the same level, right? Or maybe AP scores, or maybe IB scores, or A-level scores. Like, why are they not translating? Somebody needs to reconcile, hey, this was just a aberration or an exception, right? The student is still academically strong. Making sure that the student have the right academic courses to succeed, right? So we're talking about higher level, advanced level, college level prep courses, right? Extracurriculars, making sense of their extracurriculars. What does it really mean, right? There's obviously many different ways to write, you know, like what clubs you belong to, competitions, the size, the scale, making sure that they are who they are. And then the letters of recommendations, right? So my particular expertise is a little, very much complementary to Paul, right? I did spend time reading a lot of essays, but the majority of my time was focused on screening the rest.
Yeah, I think it's really important what they're touching on, which is, at this level, right, when you're going to a top 20 university, your academics and your test scores, that's really just getting your foot in the door, right, to be evaluated at all. It's the other stuff that Tommy mentioned, the extracurricular activities, your summer program, your recommendation letters, all those things become the thing that really separates you from everyone else who also has really excellent academics, right? So second question. I think you touched on this a little bit, Paul, but what is the first thing you look at when the application actually comes across your desk?
So it's the extracurricular activities. That's the first thing I see. When I was growing up, my mother and father were very concerned with me being a well-rounded student. I think Tommy already touched on this as well. So nowadays, it's really important for the student, at least at NYU, we see them focused on one thing, right? So if they want to be an engineer, that should be represented in their extracurricular activities. If they want to be a doctor, it should be represented in their extracurricular activities. If their ECAs are all over the place, then I kind of knew. I was like, well, I pretty much know what the essay is going to look like.
ECAs,
well.
ECAs are extracurricular activities, the same as like ASAs. ASA is after school activities, ECAs, extracurricular activities, just for all of our parents to be on the same page.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I liked that consistency. I liked it when they started early, right? This was really important. So if all the extracurricular activities, they all started in the summer of their 11th grade year, then I realized that they woke up one morning and would say, my God, I have to apply to college. I haven't done anything. And for some reason, they don't think that we can see that because it says like grade 11. We see that. I always liked unique extracurriculars. And the other thing that I think needs to be said is that I get a lot of applications once in a while that say member of a club, right? Member. What really impressed me was seeing the word founder. And given that students have 4 years to become interested in something, I think it's absolutely possible for them to be so interested in something they actually start their own club, right? That idea of leadership can be represented immediately right when we first get the application. So I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. Good points. Tommy, this one will be for you. When you get the application coming across your desk, what are some common mistakes that you're seeing students make?
Good. Thanks, Yuji. Paul will touch a little bit more on essays when we talk about essays. Actually, just a show of hands here from parents. How many parents here have a student that is now attending university? Okay, so you've gone through the process already, right? Mom is like, how recent? Last year. So 2 years. Okay. So you definitely are experienced already. So you've gone through the emotional roller coaster. Good. All right. That's important. Getting that first experience is important. This is just more of a reminder of everything for you. I'm going to touch on 3 sections for our parents. So the Common App, right? The Common Application, which is the major portal where most students will be applying to schools. The other portal is called Coalition, right? Coalition. And then some schools, like let's just say the UC, the University of California school system, like UCLA, UC Berkeley, they have their own portal, right? An independent portal. But today, they're all generally the same. Word limits, generally the same, right? Some differences. But today we're going to focus on the Common Application, right? The biggest portal. I'm going to focus on 3 sections. One is the activities. Second is the honors. And then third is letters of recommendation, right? They all play an important part. at least for me. And statistics will show you, and that they all play a part. There's a reason for all that. For activities, what I normally see, especially for parents of first-time students applying for colleges, the normal question is, Tommy, how many activities do I need to do to get my kid into Harvard, right? Or whatever it's in school. How many activities? It's not about how many activities, right? It's about the quality, the uniqueness, right, of kind of what Paul was sharing, right? When you come to activities, your child only has spaces for 10 at-large activities, right? So we have to be selective. So my first advice, especially to students listening in, this is not a laundry list, right? This is not like a show and tell time where you list everything from A to Z, right? It's about being selective, right? Choosing your most important things for being effective. Some other things. Organize most to least important. So most to least important can be two different ways. Most to least important can be either related to your demonstrated interest, because even if a student is interested in, kind of harping on medicine here, not everything needs to be about science, right? It can be many other things. A student could have a love for music, for art, for public speaking, for whatever else, right? But try your best to group, like when you list the activities, to put the most relevant activities up front, right? The ones closest to your major. The next way you are going to organize this is also by achievement, by impact, right? Was I a founder? Was I a president? Was I an officer? Was I something, right? I would organize, again, closest by interest and then also by impact, right? Some other things. I already talked about selecting activities that focus on your major. Parents, super important, especially students. I call this the STAR method, STAR. Situation, task, action, and then result. Situation, task, action, and result, right? This is how I train students, how we train students to fill out their resume. This is how we train students to answer interview-based questions, right? So when they fill out the description, it's not enough to just put this club, this competition, this result, right? I want you to be very clear in your result. I want it to be quantifiable. I want to understand scale, context. How many people did you affect, right? Like if you're talking about donation, how much did you actually achieve in terms of, donating? Or, organizing like a concert. How many people attended, right? Those kinds of scale, right? If it's a placement, how many people did you compete against, right? It's important to understand scale because first place out of 5 people means very different than third place out of 5,000 people. Do you agree? Right? So understanding scale is important. Situation, I need to understand within that description, what was the activity? Task, what did you personally contribute? What did you personally do? Right? Your action that followed. And then the result. I need to know quantifiable, right? And so this is what we help students distill out of all their actions. I think that's enough on activities. For honors, it's very similar, right? You get 5 honors and awards. Now, while they are typically designed for academic awards, they can also be extracurricular awards too, right? Awards related to their extra or professional interests, right? Things, again, this is not a laundry list. I don't care about the time you got a participation award. I'm sorry. I mean, I love that students are, attempting and trying, but I want the most important awards selected, right? So it takes time for you or our mentors to work with your students to pull the most important awards, the most meaningful awards, right? Some things organized by scale. So when you pick your awards, right, you have 4 categories: international, right, national, state, regional, and then school, right? So we organize it by level of placement. Obviously, international being the highest, school being the more local format. Not that being just school is bad. It's still important. The other way is obviously relevantness, which means the closest to your grade year. Grade 12, grade 11, grade 10, and then grade 9, right? It's very hard when I see student awards that are all in grade 9 and then I see nothing else that follows, right? It's kind of a challenge, right?
Yeah.
But it's true. Last but not least, talking about letters of recommendation, right? Can I ask, were you heavily involved in letters of recommendation for your students when they apply? Right. Parents, do you know how many letters of recommendation you can choose when you apply for college? 4. Minimum 2. You must have 2. But you have 4. And it always, it pains me when I see that students do not fully utilize all 4 letters of recommendation, right? They typically say academic and then also like a counselor type, but I will tell you my professional advice, gentlemen, you can weigh in. 2 academic references, right? 2 academic references. If you're an Asian student studying in Asia, 1 must be English. 1 must be your English literature, English grammar, composition teacher, right? They must know, because at the end of the day, Asian students who are good at math and science, how many are there in the world? Many, right? But Asian students who are good at math, science, but also good at English communication, smaller population, right? I must see excellence in English, right? The other one, I would make it related to your interests. If it's like, if you're going into math, science, engineering, go that way. If you're going into pre-law humanities, go that way, right? Number 3, school counselor is what I recommend, right? School counselor doesn't need to be a head of school, right? Parents always ask me, do I need to get a head of school in there? No, you don't, right? I'll talk about that in a bit. And then the 4th one is what I call a special interest coach, right? How many of your students play a musical instrument? Well, right? If they play it seriously, right? A musical coach, a sports coach, right? Or whatever coach that's related to their interest, debate coach, right? It could be any coach, right? So a special interest coach. 2 academic references. 1 should be English, right? 3rd is a school counselor. 4th is a special interest, right? Make it relevant. Be strategic, but definitely use all 4, right? My preference is use all 4. It's not about how high the title is. It's about how much they're willing to write in detail for your child, how much they know your child, and how much they're willing to write to support them. Sorry,
No, thank you, Tommy. I mean, I think, for me, usually the takeaway is a lot of times is that I see a lot of students who are really busy just doing tons of different activities, right? And there's a certain time when they're young, that's a good thing, right? Because they're experimenting, exploring all this type of stuff, right? But at a certain point, they have to really focus in. And when they're busy all the time and doing a bunch of different things, they don't have the opportunity to excel, right? And to Tommy's point about the way you write the activities descriptions, we're really trying to show that the student is taking action and doing something meaningful, right? Not just member participants, right? But hey, here's 2 or 3 clubs where I'm the leader, the founder, I directed this thing, organized this thing, right? And that's the important part, right? And I think a lot of times it can feel like my child isn't busy enough, right? But sometimes they need that room to actually think and make plans and do something really meaningful and impactful, right?
I would say also about, I paid attention so closely to the writing because I've always found that the better the writer, the better the student. And one thing as a strategist here that we do is we do focus on the structure of those 150 characters. You get 150 characters to tell people you changed the world. And that's tough to do. And I was pretty judgmental about when I would read through those 10. And some students only put in 6, but if those 6 were extraordinary, then, that meant a lot more than 10 that were mediocre.
Right, yeah. This next question is how to evaluate ECAs, but I feel like we kind of answered that, so I'm going to...
We kind of did.
Yeah.
The only thing I would just kind of quickly highlight on this so that parents understand, there's 2 parts I wanted to show that I didn't get to answer real quick. When we look at activities, again, it's not about how many, it's by tiering. We actually, we look at it in 4 tiers, tier 1 through tier 4. Tier 4 being the highest level, and tier 4 being, hey, I just joined, I'm a member of an organization. I don't think I need to talk too much more on that. The other thing, as Paul was alluding to, right, if I only see activities in grade 11, that's a red flag for me, right? So it's just like, I look at longevity. Longevity means how long your child has been in that activity, right? So that is important as well. Last but not least, parents, this is a trade secret.
Don't give away the secrets.
Kind of a trade secret, but you can find it there as well. At the end of the common application, this is there, and students listening in as well. Additional information section, right? At the end of your common application, at the end of all your essays, there's a section called additional information. What else do you want to put in there? For some of our students, it's kind of like some schools will ask for a CV, curriculum vitae, right? Or a resume. They're the same, synonymous, right? Some schools will ask for it, some schools will not, right? And so the 10 activities that I just explained to you and 5 honors, it's hard to fit everything in there, right?
So if schools don't ask for a resume, what we do is we help our students, right, fill out the additional section with their entire resume as well, right? So that's just a little pro tip to all of you there. But it's important. It's not just like throwing a laundry list on there. You still want to be selective with what you put on there.
Right. Yeah. Next question, right? For Paul, right? Looking at so many applications, I'm sure at your time at admissions, were there any memorable ones that stick out to you? What makes a memorable application, maybe too?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I was going to get into that later, but I mean, there's a lot of things that make a memorable application. I really like to see the personality up front. Continuity is important to me. I don't like students that are all over the place. I guess I can talk about that. And the essay, I think essay for me, again, it's such an important component because it really finally, I get to know them personally, right? But for me, the two most memorable profiles, one wasn't so good, one was really great. The first, I was reading an application, I think it was in 2019, and I said, man, this is really familiar. And I went back in the files, and his older brother had applied the year before. And I was reading the same application, which don't do that if you have siblings. The other one, and this is for the veterinarian who wants to be a veterinarian. This is really interesting. So she had great extracurricular activities. She was working with animals for most of her high school career, great volunteering. But she did something really interesting is she chose to write both of her essays, her Common App essay and her Why NYU essay, from the point of view of her future patients. So one was an essay from the point of view of a dog, and the other was an essay from the point of view of a cockatoo. And
What's a cockatoo?
It's a bird. It's a bird. And it was so great because what it does, it shows her interest, but not only that, it tells me it's not about her. She wants to care about others. And that's such an important component for New York University, is how you're going to impact the school, not what the school can do for you, right? But how you're going to impact the school, what you're going to bring to the school. And that is really probably the most important thing I look at in a profile.
I really like that. I think like obviously a very common essay is kind of like why school X, right? Like, you want to study business, you want to study law, you want to study whatever, but why do you want to study it at our school? And a lot of students, when we coach our students to research all the programs, all the professors, all the internships, all the extracurricular clubs, the cultural clubs that they can be a part of. And that's the expectation, that you research it so that you answer it, so that I can't just change why do you want to come to Harvard versus why do you want to come to Dartmouth versus why do you want to come to Cornell, right? It should, if I'm able to change those names, there's a problem with that essay, right? But that's just the first layer. The second layer, which what Paul talked about in terms of memorable essays, is talking about students who, what do you hope to give back, right? It's not about why school in terms of what do I hope to get from you, but what do I hope to give back to you as well?
And what am I gonna bring to the community, to New York University?
Right. Yeah. I mean, one for me, most of the time, a memorable profile of a student is, I think, someone who, like I was saying before, but one is that is taking action in whatever they're doing, right? There's so many students who say they want to study computer science or programming or whatever, right? But they're not actually doing anything about it, right? And so one of my students, he was really incredible because he went out of his way to teach himself programming from books, not from like a computer, but from books. He read books on programming, and then he graduated from that to programming his own software, and then graduating from that and actually buying little kits where he can program little machines to read the weather or other things. He made a clapping lamp for his own room because he was so lazy to go across the room and turn off the light, but the fact that he built that himself, right? And to see a student actually build things with their hands, right, or to actually make a change that's physical and impactful, right, I think is really important. Those are the kinds of profiles that stick out to me most.
I think to really simplify it, as an admissions officer, I wanted to see that the student cared about something. They were passionate about something. I have students right now who, they're applying to college and they say, well, fix it. I need an extracurricular activity. And the first question I ask them is, well, what do you care about? Right? And a lot of times it's hard for them to answer that. So I would encourage parents to really press them on that if they're young.
Yeah. This is another question for you, Paul, and you kind of touched on it, but when you're looking at essays, right, what was it that you were really looking for in the essays? Was there something that you were told to look for?
Well, NYU told me to look, this is very general, but they told me to look for a love of learning, right? You see that love of learning there. But what I finally realized what that was for me was evidence of change. So, and I hope all of you will help me with this, but evidence of change is like, as we all know in any story, right? You start here, something happens to you, and you end up here, and you're changed. You're not only the world changed, but you're changed internally, right? So a version of a bad essay is, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And one day, a bunch of sick dogs showed up at my house. And it was a very tough experience, but I cured them all. And now I'm going to be a veterinarian because I've showed myself. The good version of that is I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I went and sought out sick dogs who I could actually treat, right? Do you see the difference? One of them's passive, right? One of them's active. And in that story, they would learn not only about themselves, but about the world around them. And to see that lesson that they learned was incredibly important in an essay because they can tell me all the things they've done. They can say how great they are, how well they did at school. But if they're the same person at the beginning of that essay, it's 650 words, as they are at the end of that essay, that is a red flag, right? I also like a really good hook, the introduction. I like them to be emotionally connected to what they're writing about. Maybe you can add on to that.
I think that's all right. I think to me, what that kind of drives back to is that you have to be, the student has to be the main character of their own life, right? I think a lot of times students are there and they're doing something because mom and dad told them to, or I told them to, right? And they're out there doing it, but they're not taking control of it themselves, right? And that's really hard, that they have to think about it that way, that they have to be the main character, that they're doing something, right? And then also, that not that they're just busy and doing something, right? But they're really taking the time to reflect upon, why does this even matter? Why am I going to volunteer to help people? Why is this, they have to think about the world, right?
And the broader implications, right? The broader implications, how it's going to affect the world around them, not just themselves and their future. Now, here's the thing, this goes back to what we were talking about, extracurricular activities. I think it's in UC and a lot of supplements, you're going to be writing about your extracurricular activities, right? And immediately we can tell if you cared about them or not.
Yeah.
So it all kind of builds on top of each other as you go through high school.
Yeah.
If I could get some more for parents, can I just ask how many parents, or maybe my two here who already had a person who went to university, did you help revise your child's essay? Okay. Was that challenging? Yeah. It's many of you, I promise you, when your child writes their college application, an essay, they're not going to let you read it, right? Because they're most likely, if they're writing about something that is meaningful to them, they're going to want to keep protected. That's the truth, right? That actually might be the sign of a good essay, to be honest.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we work with parents, we help them, at least help them understand what we're writing about, right? So it's a little bit different. But I would tell for parents, if you don't have experience in terms of what an essay, a personal statement should look like, it should not be a confirmation or a list of all the activities that was on the activities section or the awards, right? I should not see any. I guess I can see one or two if it's a reference to the story, but I'm not looking for the child to write about all the activities again, right? I would say if I end up reading that essay, I'm not looking to be impressed the whole way across. I'm not looking to read this essay and at every paragraph, every line, wow, this is a super child, right? No. This is the next Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, whatever it is. Or Obama, that's not what I'm looking for, right? What I am looking for, if I come to the end of the essay and I have a aha moment, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that takeaway, right? That insight, we have something.
Right? If I have to pause and think about your child's essay, we might have something because it shows a thought, an analysis, a prescription that was beyond maturity of what I expect. That's what I think Paul is saying is like evidence of change, right? A reflection on something. I would say typically failures are better than successes.
Yes.
If your child talks about a failure, the story typically goes a lot better than a story about a success.
Yes.
Just my general thought.
Yes.
But it has to be a lesson.
Because they can recognize failure,
Yeah.
and most kids don't want to even recognize failure. And the minute that they recognize it, that's a sign of maturity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I always think about is that, like we were saying before, for these top schools, every student is going to have incredible academics, incredible test scores, right? It's really taking it a step further with how do you actually think about the world and reflect upon your world place in it. What do you want to do with it, right? Because, I mean, everyone wants to go to these schools and become rich and famous or whatever, right? But that's not what these colleges care about. They want people who are going to make a positive impact in the world around them, right? So I think we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to skip through some of these questions. I think one important thing might have touched on a little bit though is what are some red flags that you see in essays immediately? You just read it and you're like, this is not fit for us.
Honestly, arrogance really turns me off. Like, I deserve to be at your school because I did this, and it's going to be a big mistake on your part if you don't let me in. And to be totally honest, I got one pretty much like that. I've gotten more than one pretty much like that. These are smart kids. But if someone comes to me believing that they're so smart, they don't have to fit in with the community, that's a huge red flag because I want them to be part of the class. Also, again, no evidence of change is a red flag, I would say. And the truth is the writing as well. I mean, I think by the time a student is a senior in high school and they've had these great test scores to get through to NYU and great grades, there should be some semblance of structure in their writing. So, yeah.
I think I'm going to reiterate some and then maybe add a few other points. Something I talked about earlier. So less on the personal statement, but maybe on some of the supplemental essays. If I can change out any of these school names on your essay, right? Like, why do you want to go to Harvard? Why do you want to go to Cornell or so forth? That's a failed essay, right? That's not going to work too well. Like Paul, though, humility is big for me. Humility, and then what Paul was talking about Yuki as well, the desire to learn, right? The desire to learn, and it's kind of hard to quantify, but I know it when I see it.
Exactly.
Right? If I see a desire to learn, it doesn't have to be about school either. It doesn't have to be about a major. It can just be about people. It can be about so many things. If I see that desire to learn in their writing, and it goes back to writing, that's what really separates them apart. I think I'm gonna.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the curiosity thing is a big thing, right? I mean, for me, one of my favorite essays I worked with a student about was how he was discovering his passion for computer science, right? And actually, when you read the essay, it's a bunch of different things he's doing. He's trying to do like filmmaking. He's trying to do be a comedian. He's trying to do a bunch of random things, right? But the point of the essay is that he's every step of the way, he's thinking about what does he like, what does he not like, and reflecting upon those things. And he's curious and exploring until he finally figures out this is actually why I love computer science or programming.
Yeah. And one last thing, I think to simplify what you're saying is just active versus passive, right? Like, again, 4 years. You can be active during those 4 years of high school. If you're passive in an essay, it's immediate, right?
Yeah. So I think we're almost out of time. So I just want to close off. Before we get into the Q&A, we'll start the Q&A section, right? Any closing thoughts or advice for parents before we head off into the Q&A?
I think Paul will agree. UK as well. Start early. It's never too early to start. If you have and again, as when you talk about college admissions, specifically in the US, we look at grade 9 through grade 12. But as I showed you, when your child is applying, they submit almost at the beginning of grade 12, right? Which means they only have 3 years of profiling, right? Start early, definitely on the test prep. TOEFL, IELTS, SAT, ACT, get it out of the way. My benchmark for success is to finish standardized testing by the middle of grade 11. That is the absolute latest, parents, right? Middle of grade 11. Because what happens is if you start late on test preparation, your child is going to be doing test preparation during grade 12 when they're applying for college, which we have helped students successfully navigate doing college applications and SAT and TOEFL, but it is a nightmare, right? It's a nightmare for students listening in. Start early. The other thing I would say is, it's kind of one of those things, right? All of your students, how many of your students have a sports coach, a musical coach, or an art coach? Anyone? No? Anyone? It's okay if you don't want to admit, right? Same thing, and whether, again, like I believe very much in our admissions consulting team, our mentorship team, right? We have obviously many successes to back it. But whether you choose us or not, each their own, right? Definitely, I would say where we're at now, your student would be behooved, helped, right, with a coach of some kind, right? Whether it's helping them with their extracurricular finding, or it's whether with their eventually helping them prepare, research, and look for the right fit schools, right? I love these schools. Obviously, everybody knows the name brands, but I'm going to be honest with you. I wouldn't fit in all of these schools, and your child will not fit in all of these schools. They may fit in one of those schools or a few of those schools, right? But just because it's an Ivy League does not make it like the best school, if you will. There are many great schools. Canada has great schools. University of Toronto, we have, British Columbia, like so many schools. McGill, so forth, right? In the UK, obviously, lots of great schools are there. Everything from your Oxbridges, right, to other schools as well, LSE, so forth. Arts and design schools, we didn't really talk about that today, but they're not Ivy League schools, but they're very competitive schools, right? When we talk about Ivy Leagues, or I like to say top 20 because I want to include our liberal arts colleges, right? Your Pomonas, your Claremonts, right? Your Harvey Mudds, right? Your Williams, your Amherst. Those are all top schools as well, right? And for us working with your students, it's all about helping students find the right school for them. And parents, don't forget, is it the diploma that's important or is it the job afterwards? Which one's more important? It's the job, right? Don't forget about that, right? There are plenty of people that go to university, get fancy degrees, and then do nothing with it, right? So it's just, it's more than that. That's why it starts with now about helping them find their extracurricular interests. So hopefully, my hope, right, when they apply for college, they apply for the major they really want, right? And less about going in there and then, having to change majors. Not that changing majors is bad, right? But my hope is that they really apply and get to where they want to go. That's my hope. Okay.
Paul?
Don't have your student waste their summers, right? Like summers are really important in high school. It's a great time to actually get a lot done. And if your child ever complains that they're too busy or too tired, just remind them that they only apply for college one time in their entire life. Only once. There's no second chances, right?
Yeah, I think for me, it's something, Paul, you said, right? But something I don't see students do enough, which is to read, right? Read about the world, read books, read the news, right? Be engaged with what's going on around you, right? Because so much of the time they're just doing and not thinking about what else is going on, right? And then I think most of our students are younger here, but the college application process is a very, very personal and intense period in their life, right? And I think some parents, I think, are very, want to make sure that their student does the best and they want to be involved in every little thing, right? And I get where that comes from, right? But I think at a certain point too, you have to realize that, the students, right, they're going to go off and become an adult and you have to trust them in the process they're going to go through, right? And I think the best way parents can always support is to give them the love and encouragement that, things will be okay, right? Things will work out and that these schools are great. But like Tommy said, there's also plenty of other schools that are not these schools that might be just as good for your students, if not better, right?
Such as NYU.
Such as NYU.
And UCLA.
And UCLA. And UCLA, of course. Yeah.
Two most competitive schools to get into by volume this year.
I know.
Okay.
We have a number of questions from both Thailand and also Vietnam chiming in online. I'm going to read some of the questions, and then I'll probably turn it over to you, gentlemen. I gave you a few questions as well. I think there's a total of 8 in all. Parents, again, your childs are going through their activities, right?
And then they're sitting down with Ms. Curon, again, deeply experienced in terms of child development and helping them understand their results, right? Our team members will go through. So these are just some very widespread questions, right? All related to this. First one I'm going to read, IB program, is it more advantageous for IB universities? Right. This applies definitely to both Vietnam and Thailand. I'm going to show this here. Whether you take the domestic curriculum, domestic being public Thai high school or public Vietnam university, right? Or whether you do an international curriculum. International meaning typically advanced placement, international baccalaureate or IB, or advanced level, which is IB, right? Cambridge, if you will, right? All of those are excellent. You can achieve success with any of those programs. If you're asking me objectively, so I'm going to answer this in two parts, because typically, whether you, Paul, or myself, if you ask for my advice, I'm going to give you advice in two parts. I'm going to give you advice as a consultant, objectively. I'm going to give you advice as a mentor, right? What I mean by that is sometimes parents will ask me, Tommy, what are my child's chances of getting into UCLA based on this profile? I have to answer you objectively, based on the metrics, based on the activities, and what I think, right? And then sometimes it's just like, Tommy, this is still my child's dream school. I know their chances are moderate to low. Will you still help? And it's like, well, if I look at the rest of the profile, and we have enough schools to help them succeed, then yes, I can allocate this one slot for their dream school, right? So that's me advising as a mentor, as a friend, right? Objectively, where you will know your school, right? So it's not so much about IB, AP, or A levels or whatever, right? All of those curricula have shown success to get students into Ivy League. That's true, right? If you want to go IB because you're studying an IB, realistically, out of 45 points, you need a minimum of 43. That is the truth. 43 out of 45 points, right? Talking about your mock testing or your diagnostic testing at the end of grade 11 and then also in October, November of your grade 12, right? You need to be mocking at a 43 out of 45. Preferably, you need to be mocking at a 44 out of 45. That's the truth, okay? Another objective point though, right? And sometimes this is harder for students and parents to understand, right? Schools look at your high school's history, right? Schools, universities, they look at your high school's history. If your high school, if your child wants to go to, and I'll pick another country destination, like Oxford. If your child wants to go to Oxford and your school has never sent anybody to Oxford before, it's going to be very challenging for your student to go. Does that make sense? Right? So your school's history and legacy, in terms of that, has an impact, right? So we should be cognizant of that. But that doesn't mean if your school has never sent anybody to Oxford that your child cannot succeed. I'm just saying that they're going to break the mold, right? So just understand that legacy is important. Okay. Paul, you want to read your question?
Yes. How can a student write a prominent essay? There is absolutely no way I could answer that question right now. It would take too long. But as we were saying earlier, I would say passion for what the essay is about, show evidence of change, explore. Again, the reason I say that is because I believe some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read is in the college application essay. I have been stupefied by how good they can be. And to somehow try to tell you, oh, well, you can tick off boxes and that can happen, that's impossible. But I will say, the first thing you should do and your students should do, number one is get them to read as much as possible. And number two is to try to start them early on what actually is the college application essay, what it entails, what's the structure of it. It's different than any other piece of writing out there. There's nothing like it. It's a memoir mixed with a short story, mixed with a biography. So I would say what makes a prominent essay, as he said, you'll know it when you see it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think to add on to that, right, it's how do you get better as a writer is to read and to actually write, right? And a lot of students just don't really do that from their day-to-day life. And it makes it a lot harder once they actually get to the essay and then they have to think about their life for the first time ever. And then it's so difficult, right? It's so difficult.
parents easily, and people listening as well. Like maybe your students in grade 10, grade 11, we're not changing that much. But I'm just going to tell you right now, for parents with students like Ellie, like, almost 10 years old, right? I'll tell you that reading success, right, means college success, typically. It also means, like, no matter what, test preparation is going to be a lot cheaper for you. Right? You spend a lot less time with it, a lot less money.
I was just going to ask, like historically at Point Avenue, like which is the score we're always working on with the test prep?
Test prep, SAT, like
we're always
striving towards 1500.
But like with the subjects, we're always working on primarily is reading and
and
writing. Like always, the math scores are perfect, but they come in, and to get them over that lip that they need to be eligible for these schools, it's always about the reading and writing.
One of John's best students, or Yuki's best student, full ride into Pomona College, right? Her favorite author was
Murakami. Yeah.
Murakami, right? So Japanese or Japanese American? Japanese author, right? Famous Japanese author, written many books, right? This is somebody she, read all of his books. And then when she wrote this essay, it very much mirrored, well, not only did it talk on Murakami, the writing style very much emulated the writing style of this author. And when I read this essay as, just kind of like a final review, I could not have been more astounded in the sense of, like, wow, that was deep. It was hard to distill, right? But it was evident that the child had read a lot, had reflected a lot, and knew where she was going more than anything else. But that right there, that was a full ride to Pomona College, which is a top 3, top 5 liberal arts college.
Yeah.
Which is pretty successful. I'll move on here. I'm gonna switch over and I'm gonna turn over to your question.
Yeah. So this question is how to help your child find their career, right? And yeah, I think it's always the question kind of we're all talking about, right? What major are they going to choose? What job will they have later, right? And we're talking about having the students start young and be active in their own life and doing things, right? And I think one important thing to keep in mind, though, is that when they're a 9th grader, right, or even a 10th grader, they're still very, very young, right? They're very young teenagers, right? And they're at that age where they want to be independent, but they can't do things all by themselves, and they're caught in that in-between, right? I think that's where it's really important to have parents and other adult mentors be in their lives to push them along there, right? But it's hard because they're not little kids anymore where you're telling them exactly what to do, but spending a lot of time with them, showing them new ideas, showing them new activities, letting them experiment, and then also spending the time to reflect with them upon what did you like about that or what did you not like, right? And then to think together about, well, how do we take the things that you didn't like and do more of that, right? And then to continue to kind of be more of that mentor and coach in their lives, right? They're not a little kid anymore, and to really reflect upon them and help them explore and innovate upon those things, right? Which is primarily what we do as mentors here, right? But I think as parents, it's important because you spend the most time with them, right? You spend the most time with them, able to talk with them and really get to know them on a deeper level about what do they enjoy, what do they not enjoy. And you can drive a car, so you can take them places and do things with them, right? A lot of times it's really hard for a kid to just be like, hey, I want to go, I don't know, like learn how to paint, but the painting class is across the city, and I can't just go by myself, right? And it's really that switch of when they're a teenager from controlling to really supporting and encouraging them along the way, I think.
Just to add on that, just to give some objective advice in terms of, because I have another question here that's asking about if I'm a parent of a middle schooler, what can I do? 3 advices, right? Objective for all of you. Number 1 book that we use, and we recommend to all of you, What High Schools Don't Tell You, right? What High Schools Don't Tell You, right? You can find this, you can download it on Kindle, Amazon, whatever it is. What High Schools Don't Tell You is also from another very notable educational strategist. It talks about how to help your child find their extracurricular passion, whether it's math, STEM, computer science, history, art, design, law, whatever it is, right? And what I love about that book, some of the activities are outdated, right? But many of them are still relevant. It helps coach your child into, like, let's say they want to be a math Olympiad, right? A math Olympiad is not an easy task. Where do you start, right? In terms of finding a coach or program. What program should they seek first, right? And then what's the next competition and so forth? What's the summer program that reinforces it? Debate, the same thing. One of the best summer program debating best summer debating program actually comes out of Dartmouth, right? That book talks about that program as well. So there's many of these niche programs. Again, it's called What High Schools Can Tell You. Second thing I would tell you, what I always tell parents, force your kids into communities, right? Force your kids into communities. It could be a club inside of school. It could be a club outside of school. I don't care what it is, right? Force them in it. If they won't pick one, it is your job as a parent to force them in there. Next, it's also your job to keep them there. If I told you, how long should we keep students in an activity? 1 year. Minimum 1 year, right? That is the statistically significant number in terms of forming a habit, learning something, and reflecting on it, right? Last but not least, if you're in high school, you don't know anything you want to do with your life, do community service. Just do community service. Doesn't matter what community service, pick 1, 2, 3, and just stay with it. 1, you'll learn something about yourself because you have to do something for more than yourself. 2, you have longevity in time, right? And if anything, I don't think any admissions officer has looked at community service and goes, that was a bad,
Yeah, that's a bad choice.
right? If your child doesn't know what they want to do, that's okay. Some of us take longer. That's okay, right? But do something with your time, okay? Moving on here, if I apply for engineering school and my friend applies for business school at the same university, do we compete with each other? Yes and no, but largely no. Objectively, no, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the engineering school, the business school, we're looking at different piles. Eventually, yes, we do look at, if we're talking about Ivy Leagues, the truth is how many, like let's just say if I pick, let's pick a different school, Princeton. How many students are they going to take from Thailand each year? Definitely not more than 10, that's for sure. Probably like 5 or 6, 7, right? So at that point, then yes, they are going to spread the wealth. But if we're talking about large, slightly larger schools, UCLA, NYU, probably not, right? They're going to diversify. But I am going to be very specific, right? If I'm let's just say business school, I'm looking at the country, Thailand. I'm looking at male, female, right? I'm looking at ethnicity, right? Whether Thai ethnicity, Thai, maybe it's an American student living in Thailand. Those buckets all count, right? And then other buckets you have. You might be going to business school, but you are also an established painter artist. You check another bucket. The more buckets you have, the better you are. The fewer buckets you have, if all you are, right, the most competitive major to get into, if you are Asian male going into computer science, God bless your heart, right? That's hard, right? So the more buckets you have, the better you are, right? Just to let you know. Okay. I think a few more before we end this.
Does anyone in the audience have a question that you'd like to ask? Yeah.
Interesting communities, like you said, we should force down this community. And if we really force it into certain communities, what are interesting communities that
That's a good question. It depends. I'm going to turn it over to you, but it depends on what age, right? At middle school and at high school, very different strategies. Because especially if you're in grade 9 and grade 10, I still have time with you. But if you're in grade 11 and I'm your educational strategist, at some point it becomes less about helping your child find their extracurricular interests. And now it's more working with what they have to ensure that they get into the best platform being a university to succeed. And then they can pivot from there, right? But if I would say communities right now, if I were a parent and I had a child and I were looking at 21st century skills, what are some skills I need, right? I think is this working? I don't think this is working. Sorry. It's really get that out of your head.
All right.
I'll just talk a little bit louder.
Test everything.
I would surround them with communities that give them the skills that you hope they want. So for me, even if let's say my child is more humanities focused, right? We all know that our students eventually now, if they're in middle school, by the time they graduate high school, the expectation is that they will have some coding background. Agree or disagree?
They don't need to be expert coders, but they need to be able to look at it and make sense of it and not be scared by it, right? STEAM, STEM, all that. I always tell students, I don't want you to be like, if you're strong in math, that doesn't make an excuse that you can be weak in English. If you're strong in English, you shouldn't be weak in math. So I surround them with communities that give them that base, right? But definitely for my younger ones, community service is never wrong.
Yeah.
I do it because for my younger Asian students, it's important for them to connect, learn teamwork, learn collaboration, learn soft skills, and do that, right? I also love a lot of public speaking communities, speech and debate communities. But yeah, anything like that. If their students are interested, and again, not everything has to be community service or competition. If they love art, if they love music, if they're in an orchestra, if they're in a small band, that's equally fantastic for me. So it's kind of like I would have to spend time with your child understanding loosely what they care about or what they don't care about. But that would be my hope.
Yeah, what I would add on to that is that we talk a lot about like taking action and having the passion, right? And a big part of the college application is having that really genuine, authentic interest, right? And that comes through in the stories that you tell. And so when we're talking about communities, it really depends also on what the student wants to be doing, right? If they want to become a coder, right? You can look up online around Bangkok. I'm sure there are meetups for programmers or software engineers or hobbyists or whatever, right? And get them to go to those places and talk to the people there, right? Because they're the experts, right? Or if they really love animals, for example, right? Go to an animal shelter and surround yourself with the people working with them and learn about that, right? If they want to be a writer or journalist, right? Go find writing meetups. I'm sure those kinds of things exist, right? If you want to be a doctor, go find a volunteer community hospital or orphanage or something where you can do that kind of thing that you want to do in the future, right? And that's kind of what we mean by communities. There's communities for everything from, Rubik's Cubes to, computer programs to everything else in between, right? They exist out there, right? And so find them and have your student go there and really interact and learn from those people, right?
One of the things that we like to do, so again, I like that John kind of just expanded my answer. For my high school parents, right? One of the most difficult things is like independent research or research, right? Getting a student, like what Paul was saying, if I see founder on something, right, that stands out. If I see research on like an activity, that stands out too, right? Especially if it's a published research.
Right.
And something that we do as a team, there are very few formalized research communities programs for students. But what we do is if a student is interested in whether it's science research, whether it's political science research, or any other sort of research, right? What we do is we help them using a local university, could be here in Thailand, could be in the US, could be anywhere else, right? To reach out to a specific professor, right, that is tied to their general interests, right? Connect them with it and basically say, hey, professor, I'm very fascinated in what it is that you're doing here, right? These are my interests, my background, but this is, do you have an opportunity where I might be able to add on to something that you're working on?
One more. This is like a neat trick, okay? A lot of my students in the past 3 or 4 years have done this. There are plenty of organizations who have not expanded into Thailand yet from America. And so a lot of my students have actually brought those organizations over to Thailand and have been founders of them. And it's made a world of difference in their lives and on their applications. So it's just something to think about for parents.
I think, let me do one more.
Yeah, sure.
So this is probably the last question I'm going to take from here. Is that correct?
I think so. I think, we're
all right.
But
But I think we have a few Vietnam students listening, asking questions about EFC, right? So for Thai families, when we say ECAs, we mean extracurricular activities, right? When we say EFC, it means expected family contribution, right? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but like some students, if you're seeking financial aid, right? Let's just say for yourself, if you're sending multiple students to university, is that expensive or cheap? Probably expensive, right? And so it's natural for families to seek financial aid depending on their own circumstance, right? But if you're seeking financial aid, this might be relevant to you. How do you get to know the EFC level, which is appropriate for specific colleges and universities? Specific to this, the best way to do this is common data set. So for all my parents, I showed you the NACAC earlier, right? Another thing that a lot of universities publish on an annual basis is called the Common Data Set. Common Data Set, right? So you could go on to UPenn, type in onto Google, right? Great research. UPenn Common Data Set. It'll let you know everything about the class it recently accepted, from average GPA, average IB, like where they are in the world, right? Students internationally, students from Asia, students from Thailand, like whatever it is. Maybe not that specific to Thailand, but it'll let you know Asia, whatever. It'll also let you know average test scores, right? Broken out by, like maybe like where the students are going in terms of majors. It'll also let you know things like percentage that are given financial aid, percentage of international students given financial aid, how much that financial aid is, and the most important thing is basically, what is it? We call it the COA, cost of admission, right? The cost of attendance, right? So for my international students seeking financial aid, the most important number to you is what is the average cost of attendance, right? After getting financial aid. So you can look on this, right? So for my students looking for EFC levels, expected family contribution, which means the average annual contribution you as a family must pay for your child to go to school, right? That number needs to be close to that cost of attendance, right? Otherwise, if you're applying to it, it may or may not be relevant to you on that, right? And in terms of, I think that's really it on the EFC. We had some other questions relating, how do I write essays that get full scholarship? Well, we're not laughing because it's, we're laughing because it's a lot of work. It's obviously, we know the amount of work into it. Yeah. It's, last thing is, on this, the work I did in terms of screening resumes, activities, honors, all that was to make sure that students got a foothold, right? What Paul was doing was looking at students who would get the final mark, right? Essays, if you're looking what kind of essays get full scholarship, one, must be authentic. Must be authentic, right? Must reflect the true you. Must show a sign of learning, interest in learning, right? And it must show like a uniqueness in that. But that's really, there's no other way to say it.
And
Every
then
student
about
their own
like
story.
15 drafts. 15 drafts. Then you'll be
Your
all right.
Pomona student took 22?
Something like that.
22
A lot of
drafts.
writing.
22 drafts on an essay.
A lot of writing.
One other thing, and this is sensitive to both Vietnam and Thailand in different ways. How do you get to know the minimum EFC threshold in undergraduate admissions process at certain LACs? I would say at least specific to the Vietnam market, which is more sensitive to seeking financial aid. If you're below 35,000 annually in terms of an EFC, it's going to be difficult. If you're below 25,000 EFC, right, I'm looking for a very spectacular profile. Yeah. Right. And I think that you can apply that for Thailand as well. Yeah. Right. 35,000 EFC is, it's going to be tough. Below 25,000 EFC, you're looking for a very spectacular profile, just to be very real. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I think we're over time a little bit, but thank you everyone for hanging in there, right? Especially the online audience as well. Now, can we go back one slide? Before we close out, I just want to mention, we've been talking about getting a head start on your applications, right? This summer, me and Paul will be teaching a application intensive workshop. So if you have a student or friends who are applying to university, right? It's going to be 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks, 3 classes per week. Every class is 3 hours long, right? It's going to be 2 separate sessions. So if you can't make one session, make the other one, right? But this is going to be fantastic because we're going to hammer down all of your activities list and descriptions, what we're talking about. We're going to write 4 different types of supplemental essays that you can reuse for different schools, right? And then we're going to get a head start on your personal statement, right? And you're going to be way ahead of all your other friends who have not done that, right? Waiting until the fall. And they're like, I can do it in a month. And then they're going to be super stressed out, right? So sign up for that, right? Talk to our team about signing up for that to get a jump start, right? You want to get that jump start. At the same time, test prep, right? We were talking a lot about test prep. This summer, right, we're having a 6 weeks course in SSAT, which is for boarding school, right? And TOEFL, right? And so if you haven't started that test prep, or if you need that extra practice, right, and you have the time in the summer, sign up for these, right? Because this is really going to be the thing that gives you a head start and really going to make your life better down the line, I think, right?
If you want to go to final promotion.
Yeah, okay, so that's it for the main or for the presentation, right? Thank you everybody for being here, right? For our online audience, our team will reach out to you and answer any questions you might have. For our offline audience, we have a very special present, so just hang tight for a second, right? But otherwise, thank you online audience, and we hope to hear from you soon.